Welcome to the Revenue Builders Podcast, a weekly show featuring B2B sales leaders and executives. Hosted by five-time CRO John McMahon and Force Management co-founder John Kaplan, the show goes behind the scenes with the people who have been there, done that, and seen the results. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe, rate, and review the show to help us reach more people. Revenue Builders is brought to you by Force Management. We help companies improve sales performance, executing the growth strategy at the point of sale. Find us at forcemanagement.com. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello and welcome to the Revenue Builders Podcast. I'm John McMahon.
And I'm John Kaplan, and today we're celebrating our 100th episode. Dude.
It's been a long time. 100 episodes. I can't even believe that it's 100 episodes. Can you?
No, I can't. It's, we started out, Johnny, it's kind of like a hobby, just to you and I to be able to hang out and talk to some really cool people. And it's turned into something really special. Really special.
Yeah, it really has. I think our goal was to peel the curtain back a little bit on a lot of sales issues, but also try to talk about, personal issues that, people that had survived, really tough issues. So we can talk a little bit about that. But I think really at the end of the day, the podcast is about giving back and really taking the experiences from our guests and letting them share those life lessons and experiences for the younger audience to learn and change and not have to go through some of the same pains that we had to go through.
Yeah, I mean, it's been such a privilege to talk to so many revenue builders and, inspirational leaders and, everyone from Brian Halligan at HubSpot and Cedric Pesce at MongoDB and Ann Gary of Force Management, when she's talking about EBs, decision criteria, and champions. And so today we wanted to just kind of talk through some of our most memorable takeaways from our conversation. Now, I want to preface that with, we had 100 episodes, we had at least 100 guests. I don't want to alienate anybody at all. So if you don't hear your name called out on this, please forgive us. All of these episodes are really special, but the producers just asked us kind of from the top of our head. So I'm going to mention a couple of them. And I got to tell you, early on, Johnny, we spoke to a great leader named Doug Holliday. If you remember him.
Absolutely.
His episode was called Leading Authentically with Doug Holliday. And he wrote a book called The Rethinking Success, 8 Essential Practices for Finding Meaning in Work and Life. And man, that was just a great episode. It ripped my face off. And I got so many emails and texts about that episode, people from all walks of life, telling me how that episode just really made them slow down and make sure that they were leading authentically. And I also, off the top of my head, I love listening to Cedric Pesce's story about the late, great Carlo Carpinelli. I know he's a dear friend of yours.
Yes.
And he was Cedric's first boss in business, and how he motivated Cedric by, Cedric said he believed in me more than I believed in myself. And so again, that theme of authentic leadership was really just kind of ringing through. So those are some of them from the top of my head.
Yeah. For me, we had a lot of people that, met a crossroad in their life. For instance, we had Mania Oleon, who grew up as a shoeless Nigerian boy, became extremely successful as a businessman, and then became CEO of Samaritan's Feet with an audacious goal, some people would say, to shoe 10 million shoeless children in this world. And this year, he's going to reach the mark of 10 million, shoeing 10 million shoeless kids. Nice. So it's just amazing. The other one was Anthony Anderson, ex-Army vet that walked from Green Bay, Wisconsin, all the way to Santa Monica to raise awareness for PTSD, which he had. And they made a movie out of Anthony's walk named Almost Sunshine. I think you can see it on Netflix.
Sunrise, right? Almost
Sunrise.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then Sarah Dillegaard, who had a terrible accident in the underground in London where she was hit by a train. She's lucky to be alive. And she touched me when she said that one overwhelming emotion that she has is gratitude. And she could have died in so many times that night, but she didn't. She clung on for dear life. And wow, what an amazing woman Sarah is. And finally, the other person that really touched me was Ambassador Masood Khalili.
Yeah, wow.
And on September 9th, 2001, Ambassador Masood Khalili was sitting next to the hero of Afghanistan, Commander Masood, also known as the Lion, affectionately as the Lion.
Mm-hmm.
And Commander Masood, or the Lion, was the head of the Northern Alliance, for people that don't know. It was a U.S. ally, and it was a resistance group to Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. And that day in September, two men that were posing as journalists wanted to meet with Commander Masood, the Lion. And they came into his bunker and they assassinated him. They had a bomb inside their video camera. But Commander Masood was sitting right next to Masood Khalili. And Masood Khalili survived and the Lion died. And then Masood Khalili told us an amazing story of what happened the night before the bombing. It was a tradition in their culture to open a book, preferably the Habez, to a random page, and then let your eye fall on any random passage in the page. And the night before the bombing, the Lion and Khalili read the following passage. This really hit me hard. "Oh, you two who are sitting tonight together, value this night. Many years will pass, days will go by, months will disappear, but you won't have this night again. Value it."
Goosebumps.
Unbelievable,
Dude,
right?
goosebumps. And Johnny, what a small world it is. Like, people were asking us, how did you get Masood Khalili, an ambassador, on the podcast? And if you recall, Johnny, 20 years ago or more, I found myself on an airplane sitting next to him, and the conversation just changed my life. And we call each other sky buddies.
Right. Wasn't he looking at your laptop and you were wondering if he
exactly. Well, I got to tell you, if you go back and listen to that episode, you'll get a chuckle out of how I was just terrified. The German military had come. There's about 20 people surrounding this guy in a turban. That wasn't Masood Khalili, but it was actually the president of Afghanistan. And we were in a 747. They brought him up to the top, and then they loaded his entourage, and I go into the plane, Johnny, and I'm sitting right next to his entourage. And it's quite a funny story. If you get a chance, I think you'll really, really love that episode. And, Johnny, for me, like, I don't want to say enamored because I don't want to trivialize it, but I was blown away by the episodes that we had with the Navy SEALs. Mike Hayes and Brent Gleason, the themes of embracing the suck, which, Brent Gleason talks about, because it's when we really find out who we are, and also focusing on, who you find out who you are in times of crisis, and how we are leading others and allowing them to grow and make mistakes. And also, what it really, means to be a part of a team. And there's an ethos in the Navy SEALs that I took away that really, really makes me think. The ethos of the Navy SEALs is the more I hurt, the less you hurt. And so I don't know if people know this, but the Navy SEALs were designed to travel in teams. And most teams are around, 6 to 10 people. They're not like stealth, single individual contributors. And what that means is everybody has a role, and everybody has to do what they need to do, and it has to be perfectly in sync. And if you have to take one for your teammate, that makes the mission survive. So the ethos, again, the more I hurt, the less you hurt. So serving others, not only, the men and women that you work with, but also those that you lead, that was powerful for me. And they also talked about the difference between no-fail missions and missions where it's okay to learn. And so as a leader, as you're going out, this could be a no-fail mission where I'm going to have to take over, and I'm going to, this is not a learning mission. But then there's going to be learning missions where I know that there's room for failure, there's room for growing and coaching and developing. I just found that concept amazing, that Navy SEALs would even differentiate that. And then the last thing, Johnny, we always talk about the power of debriefing. And in the Navy SEALs, they have this concept called a hot wash. And what that means is no matter what we just came out of, no matter what the mission was, no matter what blood and bones we might have a problem with. Sorry to be so graphic. I don't mean to be, but the point is, no matter what happens in that mission, even if people were killed of their own team, they always do a debrief. And I just thought, you and I talk about the art of debriefing and how it's kind of got lost these days. And I'm thinking, here's these dudes that are men and women that are putting their lives on the line and losing lives. And the first thing they do when they return from the mission is they get in the room and they debrief. And I just thought that was a huge takeaway for me.
Yeah. Didn't Mike Hayes also talk about subordinate leadership?
Yes.
Where on a mission, he hasn't, as the leader, cornered the market on all the ways to execute this mission. And he has to listen to those on his team. And more importantly, understand the skills of everyone on his team. And maybe in the next couple blocks, as we go down this path, John Kaplan might be the leader because of what needs to be executed. But when we turn the corner, maybe somebody else needs to be the leader because of the skill set that they have. So really being intimate with your people and understanding who should be the leader at what moment in time based upon what needs to be executed. I thought that was extremely powerful.
Johnny, you're bringing up such a good point. And I think, one theme that we saw was like leaders that understood that their subordinates, everybody has a need to be heard. And when you know your voice counts and people are counting on your voice, it just brings the team dynamics to another level. And I really liked what he said at the end of the day, like Jocko Willink says in the Extreme Ownership book. At the end of the day, there's one person responsible no matter what happens, and that's that leader. So when you give people the ability to give their input, what I love is what these Navy SEALs do is they have a deal that says, look, I promise you'll be heard. And if there's adjustments we can make, we'll make it. But when we make a decision in here, we all grip hands.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't agree with the decision, you grip hands and you move as if you move and execute as if it was your idea.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, what a great, powerful leadership lesson.
100%.
So Johnny, I also, I think we're talking about things that surprised us. So, Sarah Dillegaard's story, staying calm in a crisis, an incredibly successful businesswoman. As Johnny said, she found herself on the bottom of the subway tracks in London after being hit by 2 trains, not 1 train, 2 trains. And she lost limbs and she was critically injured. And the story of how she hung in there by thinking about her children and then by using her breathing skills. This is something that really amazed me.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Do you remember?
That's what saved her life.
What saved her life? So she climbed. She was a mountain climber. She had just finished climbing Kilimanjaro. I think it was a few months before this accident. And Johnny, 99% of the people, they told her 99.99% of the people would die in that scenario, and they would just bleed out. But she had the unbelievable ability to use her breathing, her focus on gratitude, and her focus on her children. And she actually slowed her heart rate down so she didn't bleed out. And for me, not only now is she thriving and raising funds and awareness. They changed all of the MEDDIC. Remember that? With the foundation she helped start, all of the MEDDIC. She told us 80 or 90% of the people that are medevac die because they're just so dire and they don't have the proper equipment on the helicopter.
Right.
In this case, they actually had a few things on the helicopter that actually saved her life. She wouldn't have survived the trip to the hospital in the helicopter, and they changed legislation in the UK.
Right.
And that's part of her, part of her foundation, all because of her accident. So, not to be cliche, but something good coming out of something so terribly bad. And, so for me, that was a long drive home, a quiet, long drive home after that interview. I was really, really touched by her. Also, one of our most popular episodes was the Snowflake episode with Chris and, as a, startup, just the mindset of what it really takes, it really means to be in a startup. A lot of people say they want to be in a startup, but when you hear these stories about, the resources or lack thereof, the lack of processes, I don't know if you recall, but you remember when he talked about, a career that 90-day increments?
Yeah.
I mean, we joke about that, but he actually said he believed the way he stayed focused, he believed that he had a cancelable and renewable contract every 90 days. And I just thought that was a great philosophy.
We've both lived in that.
Yeah. But Johnny, how many guys do you know? I don't think I know of anybody that started with the startup as a first salesperson, then became, sales leader, hire people, boom, boom, boom. And then as the company grows and it becomes an enterprise-wide company, you're still the CRO. Like, he went through all those stages. It's just really, really rare.
It's a multi-billion-dollar revenue company. Chris is still the CRO.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It's very rare. And the last thing, Johnny, I learned so much from you, with all your experiences on, enterprise, consumption, subscription, and this wave and tendency of consumption models. We're all familiar with it. We only want to pay for, how much we use. So, I want you to bill me from when I turn the light switch off, when I turn it on to turn it off. And it just radically changes the way you go to market. And I thought we had some wonderful episodes in there that really did a great job of teaching us, like, really, when you have a consumption model, you have to have a customer success organization that's driving customer outcomes. It just can't be in title. Those are some additional takeaways I had.
Yeah. I thought a couple of insightful moments were like having, you mentioned Cedric Pesce.
Yeah.
That was a great episode for me. He talked about becoming a CRO, the challenges associated with being a CRO, the issues faced when you're scaling a sales force globally, and finally, the difficulty of leading a large global sales team with people spread out all across the world.
Yeah.
But a moment I remember most was when Cedric was speaking of how a good leader needs to give the team a vision which will keep their mind away from the monotony of everyday work, making the cold calls, doing the prospecting, doing the PG, setting up the discovery meetings, and keep them focused on the long-term prospect of why are we doing what we're doing and what are we going to become when we get there. I think those are two key elements that go into any vision statement. Cedric quoted a famous French author who said, and I'm paraphrasing here, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to assign them to tasks and work, to collect wood and bang nails, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea.
I got chill bumps, buddy.
So
I got chill. I remember vividly when he said that.
Yes.
That is so clutch. And,
so powerful.
Johnny, we talked about some things like along those lines. You and I talked, a couple of times about the difference between patriots and mercenaries.
Yes.
And how companies, when they build culture, they, people think that like culture just kind of makes itself. And when you don't focus on a culture, you find yourself building a foundation on mercenaries, those people that are paid really, really well. They execute really, really well. But when something happens, if they don't get paid or they don't get food or they don't, they lay down their arms and they go home.
Yeah, if you have a bad quarter, they'll leave you.
They leave you. Yeah. And so a lot of time when we were growing up, Johnny,
no allegiance.
Stock and equity and all these stuff, that's great. But like, look what happened last year. Silicon Valley Bank goes down and all, it was like 90% of the tech companies were affected. And so the tech industry started to struggle a little bit. And I saw it last year. The mercenaries, they laid down their guns and they went to other places. The patriots came to the leaders and said, I'm going to go home and rent. I'm going to break down my furniture and I'm going to melt the metal to create bullets. Yeah. Just tell me how many bullets we need. So they're there for the company, for the culture, and it wasn't hokey for me. It was like, that's the difference between good and great cultures, patriots versus mercenaries.
Yeah. Love that. I also liked Mark Roberge, who was the first CRO at HubSpot. He's now a Harvard professor.
Yeah. He's
co-founder of Stage 2 Capital. It's a venture capital firm. He's an extremely talented person. He's constantly trying to get to the core of any issue. Like anytime I deal with Mark, he wants to know the why. Why. He's trying to get right down to the core to understand the issue and what insight you can derive from it. But he told a story where he was the CRO, so he had sales, but he didn't have client success.
Yeah.
HubSpot had a churn issue. Halligan, instead of watching sales fight with client success over, was it a good deal or was it a bad deal? And client success couldn't support it, or we sold a good deal and the back and forth, he put Mark in charge of client success and sales. And Mark decided to do two pretty original things to reduce churn. First, he changed the comp plan to pay more on the second order from a company to ensure the salespeople would do two things. One, that the original deal would be a good deal that would stick, the deal that was rooted in the reality of being successful. And number two, by definition, the salespeople would care for the customer success so that they would buy more, because if they weren't successful, the reps weren't going to get paid more money on the second deal. So that started to reduce churn. The second thing that he did is he physically moved client success people and salespeople essentially into the same room and into pods where client success person would be sitting directly across from the salespeople that are on the same accounts. I thought that was really powerful.
Freaking fantastic. Let's talk about some additional themes, like we're on a roll here a little bit. Leading authentically, I remember kind of summing up those topics as people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that has a lot to do with authenticity. And you always talk about, Johnny, being intimate with your teams and knowing their whys. So that was a big takeaway for me. The other thing was,
on that one, let's talk about somebody that I thought emulated selfless leadership.
Yeah.
And that was John Mosley, who's men's basketball coach at East Los Angeles College.
Yes.
And his team and some of these episodes are highlighted in the Netflix show.
Yes.
Last Chance U.
Yes.
And John's pursuit of greatness to these young men and how he puts his heart and his soul into teaching these young men, not more than just basketball, teaching them about what it takes to be successful in life. I thought he was the definition of a selfless leader. So if you want to see a selfless leader in action, watch John's show, Last Chance U. It's a couple seasons old now, but it's about the basketball coach at East Los Angeles College.
Yeah, we had him on a couple of times. One in a Audible Ready, Force Management Audible Ready sales podcast. And then Johnny, when you and I started this, he was one of the first ones we did. And that was you're right, it was just phenomenal. So that, the leading authentically is really stuck with me. For me also, we talked about recruiting as if it was like breathing in these podcasts. We talked about looking for things like curiosity. And what does that really mean? People throw that around as like a cliche, but how do you know somebody's going to be good at discovery? Well, they're going to listen more than they talk. And you have to simulate that in interviews. You have to really see if people are curious. We also talked about, you don't want to hire people that haven't failed before. We don't think about that. Like when you interview somebody and if they haven't failed and you're running the kind of ship that we think you need to be running, they're going to fail in this job. And if it's the first time that they fail, that's going to be the kiss of death. You don't want people to fail for the first time, with you. So I really, really like that principle. And, customer-centric, outside-in mentality, first making it all about the customer with discovery and then earning the right to make it all about you. I thought that, people that have that inside-out mentality, outside-in mentality versus inside-out. And then, Johnny, almost every episode we talked about voracious qualification. And all the episodes where we broke down MEDDIC and talked about the how of MEDDIC, not just the what. MEDDIC's not a sales process, but it's a qualification criteria. I like to think of it as like an X-ray. So an X-ray overlays on top of the leg and it shows me where the bones are broken. It does not show me how to heal those wounds. And so the people that do the best job with MEDDIC is the leaders that do the best job with MEDDIC are the ones that help people get unstuck and they focus on the how. So we had some great episodes with Ann Gary. We also had an episode with Tony Pirelli, Selling DeVito. That was an awesome one. Oh, sorry. What did I say, DeVito? Yeah. So sorry, Tony Parinello, the Selling DeVito. Sorry about that. And then
we had him on twice.
We had him on twice. We had him on, and then instantly people said they wanted more. So we got him on really soon after that. And then Ann Gary's episodes, which talked about economic buyers and champions. And she wasn't talking about MEDDIC as like a compliance tool. She was talking about it as a conviction device that leaders use to help get their people unstuck. I thought it was just really powerful.
Yeah. One of the other ones I liked was we had Brian Halligan on.
Yeah.
And in companies, especially amongst the leaders, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. And Brian said that there's 3 types of people in a company and that they have a specific perspective regarding the decisions that are made in the company. And he put it better than anybody else I've ever heard. He said that there's me, there's team, and there's enterprise. And because of their perspective, these people bring different value to the company. Me value, team value, or enterprise value. So in making a decision, do you think more about how it's going to affect you as a person? Do you think mainly about how it's going to affect you as a team? Or do you think first about how it's going to affect the entire company? And certainly any CEO, especially successful CEOs like Brian, who's been leading or led HubSpot for 16 years, wants people that bring an enterprise perspective and enterprise value to decisions to constantly create enterprise value for the company. I thought that was really, sounds so simple, me, team, and enterprise. Yeah. Brian put it really succinct.
Really powerful. Excuse me. People ask us, what are you thinking about? What do you have in the pipeline? And it always, the conversation goes between you and I is like, hey, John, what do you want to see more of? And I got to tell you what I'm craving a little bit more in 2024, and our audience really seemed to like these episodes. Like Marcy Stout talking about, she spent, 20, 30 years in corporate America, and she had such an incredible perspective about being a mother and being a leader and how those interact, being a father and being a leader, being a family member and being a leader, and just like the balance of work life. Marcy that episode just brought so many things to light that you need to consider. Because when you show up at work, you show up with, I call it Samsonite luggage. The luggage is there. I mean, your family, your life is you spend more hours probably with the people you work with and than the people that you live with. And so it was just a really, really great perspective. I'd like to have more discussions about really work and family balance, because I believe there's a way to do both. The most successful leaders I've ever seen are the ones that have a good handle on that. They don't burn out. And then the power of the breath, like with Neha Saxena, like in that episode, she just taught us how to breathe. And we're designed to get like 80% of our energy from the breath. And we literally get less than 10% of our energy from the breath. So you can actually oxygenate your body, you can oxygenate your brain, you can oxygenate your performance by focusing on the breath. So Johnny, I'd like to see us do a little bit more with the personal performance, mind and body. And I know you like those.
No, I love that. I mean, one of the things that I'd like to see is how you balance your health with work. I mean, you talked about how people live in a 90-day increments, especially, because we live in a quarterly world where we get, especially salespeople, get a report card every 90 days. But how do we handle the stress of those 90-day increments with balancing it with exercise, diet, supplements, cold plunge, sauna, yoga, meditation? What effects can those things have on our life to help us balance the stress that's associated with living in 90-day increments? I think that could be powerful for us.
And I know I'm loving that, and I know that you'll spearhead that. I really love learning from you. And this morning, we did a sauna. We did a steam, and then we did a cold plunge at 50 degrees, and it was spectacular. I'm sitting here in Johnny's place down in Naples, and I happen to be down here for a meeting, and that's how we started off the day. Actually, he started off the day with about an hour workout before I got over here. I got to eat the breakfast and then get in the steam and then the cold plunge. But seriously,
you didn't hop in that cold plunge as quickly as you hopped in the sauna.
No, I did not. But I did pretty good.
You did.
I did pretty good. Yeah,
awesome.
50 degrees, and it felt awesome. All joking aside, there's just some wonderful, wonderful data out there about how it's just, adds years to your life and an immediate value to your perspective on life. So we'd like to do a little bit more of that. Here's the last thing I want to say, Johnny, and kind of wrapping up for me. I want to just thank you all, the listeners out there. And I want to thank you specifically for just caring about our guests as much as we do. Let me give you some examples. We brought some incredible life stories to the podcast. Manny Ohome, who you mentioned, Zach Rosenberg and what he's doing with homeless people, Masood Khalili and his dedication to his homeland and to peace in the world, Dr. Tommy Watson, and just turning around an unbelievably horrific, what did he say, Johnny? moved, was it 18 times in 3 years? And he was living out of hotel rooms with his parents going to prison. And it's just an unbelievable story in how he turned those circumstances into power. Pepper Johnson, an old friend of mine who has, I don't want to dog him on this one, but I think it's at least 3 Super Bowl rings, and he has a number. He played for the Giants, and then a number of Super Bowl rings from the Patriots as a coach. Dennis Walters, has an unbelievable chance at a PGA career, and he has a tragic accident and becomes paralyzed, and yet he still plays golf today. Anthony Anderson, you already talked about him and how he faced PTSD. There's so many stories like that, Johnny. There's many, many more that we brought. And these are all people who have chosen to use their God-given talents to serve their fellow, men and women. And, one of my favorite sayings in life is that all of us need to feel like what we do matters. The most successful people in life, they know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and what they do matters. And I'm telling you straight up, Johnny, that, for these servant leader guests that we had, it was abundantly clear that they believe what they do matters. And then all of them have expressed gratitude for our audience, you, the listeners out there, your sincere generosity. So we always talk about, on those special interest ones, we talk about, how can gain more awareness for the guest. And they always have outstanding results after being on the show, which means you guys are opening up your hearts and your checkbooks and those kind of things. So, that's been really, really cool for us. And in our audience, when you just care as much about, these servant leaders as we do, I just wanted to say thank you for caring about our guests. You guys are awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, John Kaplan. Thank you to all of our guests, as you just explained. Thank you to all of our I think we're over 320,000 listeners.
Wow.
And thanks again to everyone for listening to another episode of the Revenue Builders Podcast.
Here's to 100 more, John.
100 more.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to check us out at forcemanagement.com.